What do 1950s television, newspapers, and video games have in common? They all present the world in black and white, or light side and dark side, or heroic and evil, or paragon and renegade, which is also red and blue. In fact, red and blue seems to be a thing. Anyway, dividing the world of possible action into good and evil is a convenient shorthand that lets the player immediately know what kind of role they can play within the game world. It can be great fun to play as the noble hero or the sinister villain. Game mechanics organized around a moral axis or alignment are often called moral choice systems because they offer the chance to choose between good and evil or right and wrong. In some older games there are more complicated moral alignment systems, such as the well-known good, neutral, evil, lawful, neutral, chaotic organization. I'm ignoring these for now because they've kind of disappeared from games. They don't tend to get made with that sort of system anymore. Moral alignment in games now is typically along a single dimension, and every significant player action assigns points that move the needle one way or another along that line, from angel to demon. Save the village from bandits, get good points. Murder innocent bystanders, get evil points. This moral statistic is then used to determine how other characters relate to you, can unlock good or bad endings to the game, and sometimes has an effect on the aesthetic appearance of the character or of their environment. It's simple, effective, and highly problematic. There are several problems with the omniscient moral axis. Probably the biggest one is that these designations of right and wrong are necessarily arbitrary and determined beforehand by the game designer. Some of my most frustrating moments in games that I otherwise dearly loved were having to take an action with which I disagreed because it was clearly labeled, "This is the good choice." In the game Star Wars: The Old Republic, on the Imperial Agent quest line, your character spends several missions working with a character called Watcher X. You meet him as a barefoot, unarmed prisoner, and eventually find out he has been conditioned to experience intense pain if he resists following orders. Yes, he has done terrible things, usually because he was ordered to do them. This is a guy I feel kind of sorry for. After a certain mission, he finds his opportunity to make an escape. He calls you up over the communicator and asks you to let him go. He doesn't want to be your enemy, he just wants to leave and not be a prisoner anymore. At this point, you have the choice to allow him to leave in peace, or to hunt him down and kill him. And hunting him down is the light side choice. When you meet for the final battle, he is all regret, still barefoot, still apparently unarmed, and you just cut him down. I do not understand the logic of making this a light side choice, and it is never satisfactorily explained.
You won't make it out of this. No one ever does.
In the game Mass Effect 2, your character has frequently been in conflict with an artificially intelligent species called the Geth. You find your way to a space station, which houses a central programming hub for the Geth, and are given to understand that from this hub, you can rewrite the Geth programming to believe as you do, and therefore no longer be a threat to you. All of the companion dialogue leading up to that final decision make it clear that this is tantamount to brainwashing, rewriting an entire species' way of thinking by force to be more convenient to you. Your character, in fact, seems to interpret the idea as a war crime. And yet, the alternative, also available from the same hub, is to destroy the hostile Geth, removing them as a threat in that way. Neither of these can reasonably be called a good option. Brainwashing an entire species or slaughtering them all. And yet the constraints of the single-axis moral choice system meant that one of these options had to be designated the good choice. And the game designers apparently decided that the prohibition against mass murder outweighed that of removing free will, and so rewriting the Geth is the paragon choice.
It doesn't make sense. If they have the right to make their own decisions, how can you suggest brainwashing them to accept your way?
We stated the option exists. We did not endorse it. It is Shepard Commander's decision.
Another problem with the system is the necessity of heavy, sometimes ridiculous signaling. In order to make it clear which are the good and the evil choices, the game has to hit you over the head with, "This is good, this is evil." Often this is done with labels, colors, symbols, such as the red and blue that we noticed earlier. Frequently, it's also done by making the available choices so dissimilar as to make the player character seem dangerously schizophrenic. The Infamous games were particularly weird in this way. The main character, Cole, is often having to choose between his red and blue karma options, but at each decision point, he presents both options as though they were equally valid. Gee, I could disarm that bomb and save the cluster of innocent civilians standing around it. Or I could allow it to explode and watch as they all die. Who has these two thoughts in their head at the same time? This is not a moral quandary, this is psychosis. The mechanics that support the omniscient moral axis in games such as Infamous or Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic tend to reward extremes. There is no benefit to being a neutral Force user, or to keeping Cole's karma meter dead set in the middle. Gameplay benefits in the form of new moves, more power, unlocked game content, only appear as a player moves to one end of the extreme or the other, implicitly suggesting that only perfect heroics or absolute villainy are viable play strategies. Yet another problem with these systems is that all good actions are treated as though they are fundamentally equivalent, as are all evil actions. So in Fable, you can sacrifice townspeople to a demon, but then make the survivors happy again by dancing for them in the town square. You can be the savior of the wasteland in Fallout, responsible for saving countless lives, but be hated because you stole a few too many things from the shopkeeper while he wasn't looking. Now, I am not the only one to point out problems with the moral axis system, and so many games have tried to replace it. The games I tend to find most interesting tend to use some sort of personality-based evaluation system. Companion characters and other NPCs will have their own preferences in regards to your conduct and judge you based on how well you conform to them, usually expressed in some sort of approval-disapproval system.
This is the end. I want nothing to do with you.
A variation on this is the faction system, in which different groups within a game will have preferences and respond to you accordingly. This allows for in-group, out-group dynamics, prejudice, group loyalty, mob action, all kinds of cool, ethically complicated stuff. Of course, another alternative is to dispense with the fiction that good and evil exist in the world and can be easily categorized. Instead, we can accept the narrative challenge of creating ethical dilemmas that deal with competing priorities and shades of gray. And that will be the focus of our next video.